Next example is more elaborate, and I'm not going to walk you through this by PowerPoint, but I'm going to actually tell you this in words. So I'll blank it out for you so that I can take you through this example in terms of pure words. Teacher truancy. Let me shut this. Is it okay if I take another 5? In that case, 10 minutes? Okay, since you said so quickly, yes to 5. Yeah. Let me just walk you through this very important topic, which was another study by some World Bank people and Michael Kramer, Karthik Muralidharan, Halsey Rogers, and others. This is, I don't know if you know of the study of teacher absenteeism from schools. This is a very big problem in India. Teachers in government schools don't go in to teach. So what these people, this was known for a long time. People have written about it. Social activists have written about it. And these people did a very well-controlled study. A large number of schools in India, I forget now, 3,000 schools or something like that. They sent researchers to randomly picked schools where the researchers suddenly showed up in the schools and collected data of how many teachers were absent from the school. And it was discovered that in India, the absenteeism was 25%, roughly that. I'm not giving you exact figures. 25% was teachers would be absent from the scene. They did a multi-country study. Only Uganda had a little bit more than India absenteeism, a little higher, but Uganda was probably 27%, India 25%, and other countries with lower absenteeism. In India, it's a very, very big problem, teacher absenteeism. What do you do about this? Economists, as soon as you talk about this, will talk in terms of, well, increase teacher salary. First of all, in Indian government-run schools, actually the teacher salary by any measure happens to be pretty high. That can't be it. Next, they will talk in terms of incentives, and it is true that incentives would make a difference if, for instance, you have a punishment rule that if a teacher is found missing, you slap a penalty, you charge a penalty on the teacher. A teacher who diligently goes to school, you reward the teacher by doing that. That would work, but with one more problem, that whoever is put in charge of punishing the teacher, when that person shows up to punish the teacher, there could easily be a bribery interaction over there. That, look, don't punish me, I'm giving you a little bit of the money that I get. So working on these problems where there isn't efficiency entirely through financial incentives, to me seems, yes, I don't want to discount that. There are many domains of life where the financial incentives are extremely important, but that's not the only thing. And one good example that I would take is Delhi School of Economics, where I taught for many years. There was absolutely no penalty, and in fact, being a mature institute, there would be no checking up also, are you taking your classes or not? The absenteeism was close to zero. People just took pride in their work. Yes, they were doing research, consulting, many other things. You wouldn't find them on campus all the time, but the teaching, they took it as a serious job. When I'm supposed to teach, I teach. Nothing to do with financial incentives. It's some sense of taking pride in the work. I believe that also police, to get the police people to work honorably, you have to develop some respect for the police. If a society does not have any respect for the police also treats themselves as people who are just coming in to cut a bargain with people, take a bribe and walk away. You have to change this. How do you change this? I actually don't have easy answers, but there is a tiny little model over here which I'm going to tell you in terms of words to give you a sense of what kinds of things may be at work. You know, I believe that in India, the financial incentive cannot be the only reason why teacher truancy is so high, because of also another piece of data. The teacher salary rules in India is a central government rule. So it's nothing to do with state-wise difference. But if you look at different Indian states, the teacher absenteeism numbers are very, very different. For instance, we know that in the state of Jharkhand, where teacher truancy is the highest, it's 42% of teachers don't teach. And in Maharashtra, which is the most efficient, 14.6% is the teacher truancy. And there are other examples. Bihar, it's 37% teacher truancy. In Kerala, it's 21% teacher truancy. In the state in which I come from, 24.5%, pretty average Indian teacher truancy. So why do you have these differences? There's no financial difference. I have a view that social stigma in your community plays a role. Sociologists have written about this for a long time. Stigma matters. What other people think of you makes a difference. People want self-respect, so you don't want other people to stigmatize you. What is possible to argue is that stigma, and over here, if you blend this bit of sociology, that stigma matters, with a little bit of economics, which is an equilibrium argument, you get some very, very beautiful results, which I think also are realistic results. You know, when will you stigmatize people who stay away from teaching, teachers who don't teach? If lots of people are doing this, it is possible to argue that the stigma vanishes. It becomes a norm. You don't stigmatize, no one teaches. They all escape. Whereas when teacher truancy is very minimal, and there's one person who does not do that, there's a lot of stigma attached to that. In Delhi School of Economics, if there was one person who regularly missed classes, people would know to talk about this person. But in an area where lots of people don't do that, the stigma cost goes down. So if you take it that stigma matters, but the stigma cost depends on how many people are violating this, it is possible to get multiple equilibria. When lots of people are not teaching, it loses stigma. You don't criticize that anymore. It's a done thing in society. Whereas when most people are teaching, not teaching is a big stigma. So all this argument says is that society can get caught in two equilibria. Lot of stigma for not teaching, and very few people do not teach. People follow the rules. And another equilibrium where there is very little stigma cost, and lots of people violate this. So you can get caught in two equilibria, and once you're caught in an identical society, Maharashtrians and Jharkhand people could be identical, and I believe actually fundamentally they are very, very similar, but they are caught in two different stigma equilibria where the stigma costs are very different, showing very different patterns of behavior. These are the kinds of lessons that I would like now our World Development Report to take it a step further, blend it with other kinds of economics and taking into public domain. I'll just take literally 2-3 minutes more to tell you what our current agenda at the World Bank is. We are working on the next World Development Report, once again, a bit outside mainstream economics. This is on governance and the law. One of the things that we are looking at is corruption. And corruption is, again, one area where I feel just by working on penalty and fines, it's very difficult to solve corruption. You also have to understand a little bit about the human mind and do this with the same line that I'm taking is what I would recommend. No surprise, I'm telling you, you should take the view that I take. Don't start out by saying human beings are fundamentally different, this society and that society. Allow for the fact that they are actually fundamentally very, very similar, but they are reacting to the stimulus and the situation in which they are. And you may get a much better understanding of corruption in society, and then you begin to act on human psychology in ways where earlier we didn't even know how to do this, but now, thanks to research, thanks to economics being a bit broader subject, allowing these disciplines to come in, we are beginning to get a better handle of understanding of these very, very important human traits which allow for development to take place if you get these things in place, which earlier in economics it was a shut door that you're not allowed to research on those topics. Fortunately, economics has broadened out, which makes development economics a much broader subject. And with that, I do believe that there is hope that we will cut into the development agenda in a positive way more effectively than we have done in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I've been asked to chair this lecture, which means essentially bringing you the microphone if you want to ask a question. But I will also, since I have the microphone, take the opportunity to say a few words. This lecture is called the first PSC G-MonD public lecture on the economics of globalization. So it's an initiative of the G-MonD research group, which is the research group on globalization, which includes mostly development, trade, and all topics related to globalization. It's called the first lecture. Usually you call something first when there is already a second. So this means we are optimistic there will be a second, and you are inaugurating really a series of lectures that will be annual lectures, and we are really thrilled that you were the first, because as François recalled, you are a very rich contributor both to academics and to public policy making, and you are a kind of role model for many people in the room, so thank you again for coming. So now I open the discussion. If you have question, you raise your hand, you speak. If everybody hears you, is fine. If not, I will bring you the microphone. I suggest we take 5 questions, Kaushik, if it's okay with you. Then we take a first round and maybe a second, depending on how long the answers will be. So try to make the questions short. So who wants to ask a question? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's start with that.
Hello, thank you very much for your insights. I'm Alfredo Valadão, I'm Brazilian, so in these times, nobody's perfect. And I'm a professor at PSI at Sciences Po. What I want to ask is, when Bill Clinton made his first election campaign, presidential campaign, he said, it's the economy, stupid. I think that what you're saying is the political economy, stupid. And I think maybe we should look at one aspect, which is power in societies. And I'm looking at it when I see what's happening in Brazil, which is power, which is how to take the biggest share of wealth and honor and keep it forever. This kind of attitudes that we have in Brazil, in India, everywhere, and even in here, but in less, is a contradiction to what you said about anonymous trust. Because this implies some form of anonymous rule of law where people are treated as individuals, which means some forms of an open competition society that would be a threat to the guys in power. And when you talk about punctuality, when I look at Brazil, punctuality in Brazil, we are not at all punctual, but it's more people who are refusing to become individuals that are submitted to the same time frame, to an anonymous time frame. In Brazil, punctuality depends on how well connected you are. The question is this: is power has decisive influence in norms. So to change norms, you have to have the possibility to change the power groups. But I think that is not the role of the World Bank, but maybe it's the role for research.
Can you pass to me?
Yes, I'm quite sympathetic to your views that we should introduce social norms, psychology, behavioral anthropology, everything. Now, taking your point that actually at the end of the day, we have a world report, which is a catalog of experiments. And it looks like we are stepping back from the big picture, because before it we had growth, we had planning, we had industrialization, privatization, markets. We know what it means. It's big picture. It's like what it makes a country like South Korea going from what they had in terms of GDP per capita in the 50s, right, it is now. My question is, how would you think about those things, about norms very much are localized? And how do we get from this small sort of nudging picture to the big picture, the aggregation process, and to make significant advance in terms of systematic development?
It's always a pleasure to hear you speak, Kaushik, and always thought-provoking ideas. Actually, my question was stolen by the previous question, but I can perhaps phrase it slightly differently because I have I think indeed the experimental literature that looks a lot of these psychological issues in economics has been criticized for, I would say, looking too narrowly at very specific questions that can't be generalized. And as economists, particularly, I also work at the OECD. I also teach a course at the Paris School of Economics, and we're always trying to give broad insights and broad theories, and a lot of what we prescribe is based on econometrics and panel data analysis, where there's also, I would say, important critiques about causality, about identification, and these sorts of things. And you sort of have these two extremes, and I don't know, what's in the middle, and where do you see the sort of fertile ground for empirical applied economists to be looking and trying to answer these kind of deep determinants or even proximate determinants of growth and human behavior?
So I'm passing to François, and then we can go to the back.
I think we started already with not only the big picture, but also big questions. Maybe mine will be a little more simple. Coming back to your last example, I mean, the issue of multiple equilibrium, and this happens in many, many areas. I think you're absolutely right to mention that this is a fact that we can observe comparing countries, and as a matter of fact, we can observe when studying specific countries. Your example with the smoking habit is a very good example. But I think that what we have to understand is not so much the possibility that there are more than one equilibrium, but what we have to understand is how we move from one equilibrium to another. And a preliminary question, as a matter of fact, in many instances, is also to know what kind of equilibrium is best in terms of development. Because as a World Banker, I'm not accusing you, but let's say World Bankers sometimes have very, very strict views about what equilibrium is the right one. And I'm not sure at all that they are right. And if they are trying to push a transition in a direction, they are really producing things which are going against the development process. So the transition is really what I believe matters most.
In India, a person went to a highly placed officer and asked him, "Why do you take bribe? You are so rich and you don't need any money." He says, "Yes, I don't take it for money, but if I don't take bribe, people will think that I'm no one. I don't have to make any decision. They can get whatever they want without any effort. That is why, to give me more importance, I take money."
Okay, I suggest you take this first round, and we see we have time for a second one.
Okay, why don't we? No, the first question is, it's a rather difficult one on the power, the role that it plays. It's a political economy question. You're quite right. The understanding of power itself is very, very deficient. And that is the last topic that I just mentioned, that we are beginning to work on, governance and the law. There we are actually beginning to go in. So what I was talking about, it's our earlier work, which is on psychology and society. But the work that we have started is, given that we are looking at governance and law, we are beginning to delve into questions of power as well. But you know, power, I've had a long-standing interest in the subject. I've written on political power and where it comes from. I'll tell you, my own view is, in the end, there's something very vacuous about power, because a person's power depends on other people's beliefs about that person, which at one level is very vacuous, but also makes it very strong. When it's masses, the way the masses behave, if that props up a person into power, the behavior of masses is very difficult to change. And so the power has a very important dynamic which we don't understand well, and I agree with you that it makes a difference, not just in Brazil and India. I think even in rich countries, these things can suddenly begin to go off wire. We are seeing some politics playing out around the world where there is a bit of a risk of the kinds of things that you've seen in emerging economies that will come here. But not well understood. It's a topic that where we do have researchers now looking into this. Thierry, your question on the big picture, you know, I mean, the way I look at this WDR is very important, very worthwhile. So but it's a first step. And at least it breaks the economist's mindset that there's just one way in which to go and reach out to people. If you want to get education to them, just give them an offer of education. If you want them to take credit, just go there and try to give credit. The way you pose the question, the way you use human psychology, those are things that ought to be investigated. And this WDR gives you a whole lot of strings on this. What you have to keep in mind, and it relates a little bit to François' question later, and I'm going to come back to that, is you have to remember that the way these norms work, psychology work in certain societies may not be replicable all over the world. One very important study where choosing women leaders in local village council, this is a famous work by Esther Duflo and Raghav Chattopadhyay, that if you have women leaders in local councils, the provision of public goods improves. That is true in their study, which was done for 2 states in India, Bengal and Rajasthan. There it's certainly true. I'm not sure that this is going to be the case everywhere. In another society where women have a very different status, if you make a law and make women come to power, it can occur, the response can be very different. So you have to be careful about the local and how you take it further, and the nudge to the big picture question is also there. How do you go there? All open questions, but at least this is an area which we use the bully pulpit of the World Bank to bring it a bit into public discourse is all that we were trying, and great to see you after a long time. You're asking a very difficult question also on causality and identification, first of all, that we've chatted about a little bit in Delhi, if I remember right. On causality, I must give you my very somewhat of a fundamental view on this, that causality, first of all, I believe you can never demonstrate. A causality which is a usable causality which you take elsewhere, you can, no matter what you do empirically, no matter what you do theoretically, you can't get to causality. My view on this is that causality is very carefully done empirical studies coupled with common sense and intuition. Causality more or less lies in the eyes of the beholder. It is something that we look at the world and we work causally. If you put the pen down over here, it will remain over here. Philosophers have taken that line, and I feel there is something to that. There's one very beautiful thing about how human minds perceive causality differently. There is a famous photographer, Eric Valli. I don't know which country he's from. He did this study, photography work for National Geographic in Nepal, working with these Nepal tribes people who climb up very high trees to collect honey. So Eric Valli asked one of them, "You all climb such high trees, don't you ever fall down?" To which the man replied, "Yes, when our life is over, we do fall down." So you can see that to them it's an opposite causality, that life comes to an end at some point and then you fall down, and that is carried out. So on causality, I think underlying economics, there's a lot going on. A lot of it is perception, and there is something a bit more concrete. I feel we economists give too little room to intuition and common sense. Intuition and common sense is something which has come to us through evolution. So our intuition must not be dismissed altogether. Common sense must not be dismissed altogether. I don't know if you were pushing me into this, but I'm going to give you one more thing, that randomization, it gives you a lot of very useful knowledge. I really don't want to discount that. But to treat that as the only way to pick up causal ideas is damaging, because if you look at a child picking up information, as a baby becoming older, all kinds of wrong methods being used. Something happens and the child believes that when a person smiles, that person is being good to me. If you stop the child and say, no, first you have to make a random group of people smile and another group of people not smile, and then you'll pick up information, you'll damage the child's thinking. The child does all kinds of ways in which the child is picking up information, and most children grow up with a fair amount of information, which is this very ill-defined capacity for intuition and common sense, which has come through these processes, which plays a role. So empirical work, I do believe these things sound a bit of cliche. With theory, with a lot of common sense and intuition, you have no escape from that to get to a bigger picture. François, your and breaking it up into two parts. How do we move from one equilibrium to another, and which one is best for development? Let me take the second one first. I don't have a clear answer, but I do believe that economists very often do this wrong. I mean, they decide that this is the best one, and then you bulldoze over other societies. Minimally, what we should do, respect for the society where you're working with, which anthropologists tend to do. They listen to others a lot and begin to get information out. I feel there is something important. When you go to another society and try to impose something, and the local people say, no, this won't work, don't dismiss it in terms of that I've come. And I've seen this not just from an international organization to a village, but sitting in Delhi, we develop ideas of how you intervene in a small village in Tamil Nadu. You go there and you begin to do things, and the local people will say, this won't work. What you're pushing for is not going to work. We are very often insensitive. We've got the best education, best minds have worked, we bulldoze through. You have your eyes open, a bit more open, and that's about the best you can do in choosing a better equilibria. And how do you go from one to the other? Again, we don't know, but two things are important to keep in mind. First of all, this I don't have to persuade you, but a lot of mainstream neoclassical needed persuasion. Societies do have multiple equilibria. And so the fact that you're in one situation doesn't mean to get to another situation, you need a different set of people with different mindsets. The same group could go there. How do you move? Well, all we do know is societies do move from one equilibrium to another. That also you need to know that it's not just that there are other mythical equilibria, you do need. There are areas where you've seen these changes. The Japan example I gave you to me is a dramatic example. Other things which I have seen, I feel in India, I don't quite know where it's coming from, punctuality norms are suddenly improving. Well, improving, I don't know, these are value-laden words. There's something nice about being unpunctual as well. But it's becoming a more punctual society, India is. Especially in Delhi, government meetings and all, compared to 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and no mistake about it, punctuality is good for the economy to function. Over here, there's no two ways. So you don't want to encourage unpunctuality. It allows efficient use of time and society to do better. In India, I don't have hard evidence, but I feel there's a distinct improvement in punctuality norms. More visible in Delhi than in Calcutta. These are two cities I know. It probably has something to do with also the economy. As the economy begins to churn and move, the costs of unpunctuality become bigger, so it's changing. I know that it has changed in Japan. I know that hardworking, when people say this group is lazy and that group is hardworking, I feel, again, these things are become a part of norm. You can move, and we've seen some shifts taking over, which we have to study and try to do better through that. And your last question on bribes, actually it is true that there are some kinds of corruption which is almost a status. It shows your power, that you can do this, that you're making a statement that you are corrupt. So occasionally it goes with a little bit of pride that, to be corrupt. And it's I think it's pathetic and sad that this becomes a matter of pride, but it does indeed happen in some places.
Hello, and thank you for your lecture. I had a question about that last point, about the evolution of norms. You mentioned that norms do evolve, but you seem to imply that it is often necessary to have a policy intervention to go from one equilibrium to another. There's, however, in all literature in economics, Hayekian literature, in which norms evolve in a sort of Darwinian way, in the sense that social norms that are better functioning or more efficient for some society will tend to expand, while less efficient social norms or societies driven and organized by less efficient social norms will tend to dwindle down. So do you think that there is necessarily a policy intervention there, or can there be a free market of social norms in which the best or the more efficient social norms thrive and not the others?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very enlightening lecture. My question is about the impact of this World Development Report on the policy-making communities, notably in developing countries. To what extent it has had so far some impact and already a beginning of application in the policy approaches. Thank you.
I will ask a question in the same spirit, but for students. So you told us you are going back to academia. Maybe at some point you will want to write a new edition to your very popular graduate textbook in economics. Will you add chapters on this, and would you write other chapters when you revise them differently in the light of what you just lectured on? Because part of it is also how economics and development economics is taught. So maybe we take one last question. No? Okay, then that's it.
Okay, good. Again, let me go in order. No, I don't take the view that you should leave it to, it is true that you can go from one equilibrium to another through the operation of free markets. But in that case, really, in the dynamic of things, you're in the same equilibrium. You've gone from one situation to another through time, through natural processes. That is one dynamic equilibrium. So what I'm asking for is that more purposive intervention, but there I'm fully aware that at one level there is the same risk, which is what François was pointing to, is that the purposive intervention could also be used by people deliberately to get their own advantage. So there is no easy answer to that. As soon as the paternalism criticism, I fought off in the World Bank in starting the report, but I'm also aware that you can have paternalistic interventions where you do that in order to get some advantage yourself. And we've seen history is full of that. Colonial powers arriving in distant lands, they will begin to engineer societies to behave in certain ways. There, the engineering is being done with a particular motive to make it easier for colonial exploitation. So interventions are risky. But once again, I feel we have to think of certain areas where interventions are needed. You want to deflect society from one path to another. So I wouldn't leave it entirely to the free market of that. But I know that I'm giving you not one clear answer, but that is what life is. Most questions, if you think hard enough, there isn't a clear answer. On your World Development Report and the policy-making community, it's difficult to tell. Again, we have to be a bit modest. There's a bit of a tendency, if you're in an international organization, once you've done a report, that becomes the new orthodoxy. And then you go and bulldoze the development community with that. So you have to do that with some modesty. But the main thing to do is to engage people, teach what we have started doing in the World Bank. This was done earlier, but we are trying to do it as seriously as possible, is operationalization units, which will then take the report and go and work in the country, taking these ideas. And I think the best way to take the ideas to have an impact is, again, not to bulldoze from outside, but sit down, persuade the people about the importance of this, and then try to take these ideas forward. And finally, Hillel, your question on, if I were to, I don't know if I can go back to that book again, but if I do, I will bring in a certain amount of behavioral economics, but once again with a word of caution. One reason why behavioral economics became so important, if you take the first sort of finding that human beings are not always rational, that became important only because mainstream economics was so narrow-minded. So it is really not a big finding. But having started from that, of course, you've discovered systematic irrationalities. The exciting thing about behavioral is not that the main statement which some people say that human beings are not always rational. That's important only to mainstream economics, to no one else. But the systematic irrationalities which have come out through the work of Kahneman, through the work of Tversky and a whole bunch of people, they are extremely important. And I would like to draw on some of that and bring that into my book. In fact, in my book, in the first edition, I did talk about the taxi driver problem, that we don't run away without paying, not because of plain simple economic calculations, but because certain norms are drilled into our heads. So there's some hint already, so I'll probably pick up on those and develop further. Thank you.
Thank you. So.